They built a world out of stone and law, a world of roads that seemed to stretch to the very horizon, with armies that felt, well, invincible. They gave us languages, governments, and a vision of civilization that, even today, both inspires and haunts us. For more than 1,000 years, they didn't just exist in the world, they were the world. And even after their empire finally crumbled, its ghost, it never really went away. These ruins you see, they aren't just relics, they're foundations of our own world. So who were they, really? Were they gods? Tyrants? Maybe brilliant philosophers? Or just stubborn farmers? The answer, of course, is yeah, all of the above. But what was the secret ingredient? What was the source code that powered this incredible, and let's be honest, often brutal, civilization? To find that answer, we're not going to get bogged down in a timeline of dates and battles. No, we're going to dig deeper. We're going to look at the mindset, the systems, and the sheer relentless will of the people who called themselves Romans. You see, before the Romans could even think about conquering the world, they first had to conquer chaos right here at home. And their weapon of choice? It wasn't a sword. It was a system, a legal code. Now, we all know the founding myth, twin sons of a god raised by a wolf. It's an amazing story, super dramatic, very divine. But the reality? Well, it was a lot more practical. Rome didn't just spring into existence. It grew, slowly, by absorbing its neighbors. You see, their real genius wasn't in inventing everything from scratch. It was in spotting a good idea, whether it was a Greek god or an Etruscan arch, and saying, yep, that's ours now. They perfected adaptation. And right at the very heart of their society was this powerful concept, the ius civile, the civil law. Think of it as their original operating system. It was strict, it was based on ancient traditions, and this is key. It only applied to you if you were lucky enough to be a Roman citizen. It laid out the rules for everything, creating a predictable, ordered world, as long as you were on the inside. But here's the thing about a rigid system. It can shatter under pressure. The Romans, being incredibly pragmatic, knew this, so they built themselves an update. Alongside that rigid civil law, they developed something called the ius honorarium. This was basically law made on the fly by magistrates to deal with all the new problems the original code couldn't handle. The Romans themselves called it the living voice of the law. It was this flexible, adaptive layer that let their whole legal system bend instead of break. And just so we don't think this was all some abstract legal theory, get a load of this. From their early law code, the 12 Tables. It is brutally specific. There are no fuzzy principles here. It is a clear, step-by-step procedure with very real consequences. If you owe money, that clock is ticking. This is what it all boils down to, a society built on crystal clear rules and absolutely severe consequences. Okay, so with their society ordered by law, the Romans could finally turn their gaze outward. This legal software was incredible, but it needed some serious hardware to run on. It needed an engine for conquest. It needed their military machine. And the Roman soldier absolutely evolved. I mean, just look at the difference here. On the left, an early Italian hoplite, kind of like his Greek cousins, basically a citizen defending his farm. But on the right, that's the legionary we all picture. This wasn't just a new helmet and shield, it was a total shift in mindset, from a part-time militia to a full-time professional army that served for decades. This was an engine of conquest. And here's the thing you have to get about the legionary. He was so much more than a soldier. Of course he was a master of that short sword, the gladius. But after the battle was won, he'd trade that sword for a shovel. These guys built the forts, the bridges, and the thousands of miles of roads that would stitch the empire together. They didn't just conquer a place, they physically built Rome right into it. And on the battlefield, they were just relentless. Their main formation, the triplex Aches, was basically a system designed to never run out of steam. It wasn't about one heroic charge. First, the young guys, the Hastati, would go in and wear the enemy down. Then, just as they started to get tired, the second line of seasoned veterans, the Principes, would push forward right through the gaps, bringing fresh legs and sharp swords. And if things got really bad, you had the third line, the elite Triarii, the absolute best, held in reserve. It was a meat grinder, a system designed to simply outlast anyone foolish enough to stand against it. So you've got this incredibly ordered society and this unstoppable military. What happens when you put them together? Well, you get the world we still see in the ruins today, a world that was quite literally built to last. The Romans were absolute master engineers. And their success really came down to a few game-changing innovations. They perfected concrete, making it cheaper and stronger than anything before. That's how you get something like the massive, unsupported dome of the Pantheon. They mastered the arch, which let them build bigger and stronger across any terrain. And then there were the roads. Not just paths, but dead straight lines of power, cutting through whatever stood in their way. 53,000 miles. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. That's enough road to wrap around the Earth more than twice. And these weren't just for moving goods. They were for moving legions, fast, to stamp out any trouble. The roads were the arteries of empire. And if the roads were the arteries, then the aqueducts, they were the veins. They piped millions of gallons of fresh water into cities, which is the only reason those cities could grow so massive. We're not just talking about drinking water here. This water fueled the huge public baths, the beautiful fountains, and the sophisticated sewer systems. It was the infrastructure of civilization on a scale nobody had ever even dreamed of.
But, and this is a really big but, that same engineering genius had a much, much darker side. What you're looking at here is the siege ramp at Masada. This is Roman engineering as a weapon. To crush a rebellion on a mountaintop fortress, they were willing to literally move a mountain to build a ramp to its walls. Their incredible ability to create was matched only by their absolute determination to destroy.
So where does all this leave us? A civilization of brilliant laws and beautiful aqueducts, all paid for with brutal conquest. This brings us to what they left behind, their echo. And that's the central paradox of Rome, isn't it? On the one hand, they created the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, 2 centuries of relative stability, trade, and order, held together by law and incredible engineering. But on the other hand, that entire system was built on the backs of slaves, paid for by violent conquest, and maintained by ruthlessly crushing anyone who stepped out of line. You can't separate the two. That paradox, that complicated, messy legacy, is Rome. And whether we know it or not, every single one of us is still living in its shadow. I mean, seriously, just think about it. The legal systems in most of Europe, their family tree goes right back to Roman law. The very language I'm speaking right now is packed with Latin roots. Every time you walk into a Capitol building with a big dome or watch a game in a giant stadium, you are looking at a Roman idea. And our political arguments about republics, senates, and the meaning of citizenship, yeah, the Romans started that conversation 2,000 years ago. So we're left with this massive, uncomfortable question. Rome gave the world an ideal, a blueprint for civilization, but they built it with fire and steel. So what is its true legacy? Can you separate the beautiful building from its violent foundation? Honestly, there's no easy answer. That republic, the one that built this entire world, wouldn't last forever. It was destined to fall and give way to something even more powerful and far more dangerous. Join me next time as we explore how Rome became an empire of emperors and how absolute power corrupted men who began to believe they were gods.